Capital Ideas. I'm Sandy Behan, and our guest this week is a rookie, Wallace Collins. Welcome.
Thank you. I'm enjoying being here.
Good. You are going to be a representative for the House District 45. Is that correct?
Yes, that's right.
Okay. And this is your first term.
Green as a gourd. Yes.
Green as a gourd. Okay. I thought we might start off just by introducing you and talking a little bit about your background, and I know you're a lifetime Norman resident and some other things. So let's just kind of get a fill-in on who Wallace Collins is.
Well, as you say, I was born and raised right here in Norman, attended Jefferson Grade School, and went to Central when it was just Norman Junior High, and of course attended Norman High School. So gone through the public school system all right here in Norman, and always lived here in Norman, raised my family. Still got one left to try to get raised, but yeah, I've got deep roots here in Norman.
Okay, and you were a business owner, in fact, right?
Right, I own Collins Auto Machine in partnership with one of my sons, David.
Okay, and how long have you had that business?
10 years.
10 years. And if I'm correct, as a part of that, you're a member of the Machinist Union, is that correct? And have been active in the...
Yes, I've been a member of the Machinist Union for 29 years. So have a long association with that.
Okay, and what prompted you to run for the state legislature?
Well, I've always had an interest in politics, and like I've told several people, my first recollection of doing any campaigning was when I was about probably 5, maybe 6 years old, and I put my dog in my red wagon and put 2 Roy J. Turner signs on the side and walked around the neighborhood. So that'll give you an idea about my age, because I think Roy J. Turner was elected in 47, so maybe 48, I don't remember exactly now. But I've always had an interest, and I've worked in numerous campaigns in the past, and just kind of as a dream, I got to thinking maybe someday I ought to work for myself, you know, and so it seemed like that after the 1994 elections, I began to think that maybe that dream might come true, and so in 1995 I made the decision to go ahead and run for the vacant House seat for House District 45.
Okay, now you said you went to Central when it was a junior high, 7th, 8th, and 9th grade, right?
Mm-hmm.
Were you, and to Norman High School then, were you involved in student government, student politics at that time?
No, I actually wasn't. I was trying to remember. I think we had a student council at the time. That didn't really interest me. I didn't participate in any of that. I was a hall monitor one time. But other than that, I don't recall being involved in any student government.
Okay, why did you choose the state legislature for your first elective office? I mean, it's sort of a huge leap forward, shall we say, from city government or more local kinds of things.
Well, I guess maybe the state level and national politics was maybe more my interest. I had given some thought to possibly running for a city council seat or something like that, but I guess it just wasn't where my heart was. And like I said, the state and national politics was of more interest to me, and so I just never did run for a city or a county office, and part of it was just the opportunity, the fact that the House seat was being vacated and was going to be an open seat, and so I thought, well, if not now, when, you know?
Okay.
Why not?
Why not?
So,
this was your first election, your first elective experience as a candidate, and in your particular race you had opposition both in the primary and then again, of course, during the regular election. Was it what you expected to be?
well, yes, I guess I'd have to say it was. I mean, as I said, I had worked in a lot of other campaigns, probably not to the degree that obviously I was involved in my own campaign, but I think I had a pretty fair idea of what was going to be involved, and certainly the door knocking and the walking in the neighborhoods and the putting up the signs was the kind of work that I had done for other people in the past. So I had a pretty good idea of what to expect there, but I'll have to admit that it is a little different when it's your own name on the ballot or on the sign, you know.
Okay, and of course, politics today tends to take a rather negative turn. It gets kind of personal, and at times. How did your family feel about being involved in all of this?
Well, I think they were at first surprised. I mean, they knew that I had this interest, but I guess they didn't realize that it would ever come to fruition. But I think overall they were supportive, and they were glad to hear that I was finally taking that step. And one of the things that was kind of humorous, I guess, is that two of my sons that were from out of state, when they came to town for the election, or another one came in from a visit that was prior to the election, but nonetheless, when they would actually drive into town and see my signs along the roadway and that kind of thing, then it actually kind of brought it home to them even more personally. And even though we had been in communication and they were aware, that I was running, it still hit home a little harder once they saw my signs, and they said, "Hey, there's Collins for House District 45." They, it just really hammered it home to them then, and so that is something that, as we would drive around campaigning and I'd see my own signs, and I'd think, I'm really doing this, it's not just a dream.
As you look back on it now, you've had a couple of months to recover. What are some of the good things that happened to you during that campaign process?
Well, I think the one thing that my wife and I both agreed on that we enjoyed it, and my wife, she matched me step for step on the campaign trail, and she was definitely an asset, and I can't give her enough credit. But we met an awful lot of people and rekindled relationships or friendships that maybe we had, where we hadn't seen people in a number of years, and we would meet them again and meet new people. And it's quite strange that how the campaign kind of made us realize what a small world it is, because we met people that I didn't personally know, but they might have had some contact with my mother or my father or my grandmother or some relative, from my distant past of 40 or 50 years ago. And we met a woman that was present when my older brother was born, and I did not know her, but I had heard the name, but I'd never met her, and yet we met that woman. And I thought, if we'd gone out searching for someone like that, I wouldn't have known where to start, and yet we stumbled onto her on the campaign trail. And so things like that were really interesting and made it seem like a small world.
Okay, and what's your least favorite memory of the campaign?
Well, I had one or two people that, made comments. They were kind of rude, and people that didn't know me and didn't give me an opportunity to really meet them or come to know them, and yet they would tell me that I represented what was wrong with the world today and get off my porch, or things like that. I guess I'd have to say that was the least favorite thing.
Okay. As you went around and you talked to the people who would be your constituents, what were their primary concerns?
Well, I think that most everybody was concerned about crime and education. That seemed to be probably the two top priorities. And whichever one was the top priority for one person, it would be the second thing. The other one would be the second thing. So that I think those two issues generally were at the top of pretty much everybody's list. And of course, education kind of covers a broad spectrum in that, at least to me, education also deals with jobs and that kind of thing, because obviously without an education you can't get a good job, and education is the key to being able to have a good job. So I think that just education alone doesn't just mean your schooling and that's all. I mean, I think it encompasses a lot of things involved in life.
Okay. Describe your district. It's not just Norman.
No, it covers the east part of Norman and also includes almost all of Noble. It covers a mix of urban and rural. It's generally bounded by Franklin Road on the north, goes as far south as Slaughterville Road. 60th is the east boundary, except for 2 miles of Noble where it goes east to 84th. And on the west side, it's a pretty jagged line that zigzags down through Norman, through the middle of Norman. But I always told people that it looked like a piece out of a jigsaw puzzle.
Did you hear the same things basically from the rural as you did from the Norman residents?
Yeah, I think the issues were still pretty much the same. People are interested in education. People are interested in, or worried about crime and crime prevention, or the prison situation and things of that nature. And So I think that it didn't really matter if they were in town or if they were in the rural areas. They were still pretty much concerned about those same things.
What about the age distribution of your district? Is it an older population, or is it pretty much of a mix?
Well, I'd have to say I think it's probably pretty much of a mix, because obviously there's a lot of new housing additions which have a lot of younger people, people that are more mobile, have just moved into the area, or even maybe just moved to town from out of town or out of state. And of course it has the old original town site in it, so it has probably a good mix of old and new.
Okay, now when you leave us this morning, you're going to go to the Youth Listening Conference over at OU, is that correct?
Yes, that's correct.
Okay, and what kinds of things do you expect to hear there?
Well, I'm not quite sure what to expect, but from what I understand, there will be a panel of young people there that will be discussing their, I guess, their wants and needs, their desires, their fears, so that I think that they're wanting answers to questions regarding their safety, their future, their education and things of that nature, and things that will affect them the rest of their life.
Okay, and your son is a student at Central, correct?
Right.
Okay, and what kinds of things does he express concerns about that you expect you would hear at this listening conference?
Well, right now he's pretty concerned about girls, but
Girls.
but except for that, I think he's concerned about what he'll do for the rest of his life, which again, will be involved with his education. He realizes that he'll have to work, make a living, and that he'll have to, he'll want to raise a family and be able to support them. And just like any other kid, he hopes to do better than what his parents have done. So I think that in that sense, probably his thoughts or his wants and desires are going to be about the same as any child his age.
Okay. Now, do you get to speak at this, or are you just there to listen?
Well, I'm not quite certain, but I think that we will answer questions or make comments on statements or comments that the kids make. So I guess I think that we do get to speak some, but I have not been to one before, so I'm not quite certain.
Okay. Since the election, what kinds of things have you been doing to get ready for the session, which starts, what, February 4th?
February 3rd.
3rd, okay.
Well, we've been doing committee work already, so I've been involved in research, and we've begun to read bills, and there have been some caucuses to attend that I have attended, and some training sessions and different things like that. I've had boxes and boxes of reading material, so I'm just like the kids. I've had a lot of homework to do.
Okay. Now, you took over Ed Crocker's district, right?
Right.
Okay, and you are a Democrat.
Right.
Has the Democratic leadership reached out to you to try and help you get into what it is you're about to take on, to help you learn the task a little more quickly?
Well, I feel like they have. House Speaker Lloyd Benson has done some things that I think were very beneficial. I think some of the things that we've done this year hadn't been done in the past in regard to some training sessions and caucuses, so that we as freshmen can kind of hit the ground running rather than just have to sit back and obviously there's going to be some on-the-job training, but I think we're in good shape as far as knowing what we're getting into and what's expected of us. And I must say I was quite thrilled and pleased to have received a vice chairmanship of the Commerce, Industry, and Labor Committee. I certainly was not expecting that, but I felt like that the leadership exhibited a lot of confidence in me to put me in that position, and I'm very grateful.
Okay, very good. And we'll be back in just a moment with two students from Central Mid High School. Our student guests this week are Michael Hobson and Sarah Jefferson. And Michael, I believe you get the honor of asking Representative Collins the first question.
Okay. How many days a year do you work as a state legislator?
Well, being a state legislator is a little bit like being a school teacher in that it appears to be only a part-time job, but actually it winds up being pretty much a full-time job, in that even when the session is not going on, there are still a number of things to do and research to do and meetings to attend and that sort of thing. So I'd almost say it's 365 days.
Yeah.
Have you pre-filed any bills?
Yes, I have. I've pre-filed 2 bills and possibly a third. One bill deals with the changing of the state constitution, actually, regarding the passage of school bond issues. At the present time, the Constitution requires a 60% majority to pass a school bond issue, and I think that's puts an unfair burden on the school system, because I think this country was founded on the principle of majority rule, and I think that school bond issues should only have to be passed by a simple majority rather than the supermajority of 60%. So I have filed a bill to hopefully change that.
Now, in fact, places like Moore consistently pass bond issues in the 54-55% range, right? But they can't go into effect because they don't get that 60% needed.
Right, and at the past general election, Noble had 2 bond issues, and one received 57% and one received 58%, but nonetheless they didn't pass because they didn't get the supermajority of 60%, and yet a majority of the people did support them. And so those are the kinds of situations that have prompted me to file this bill. And one thing that a lot of people don't understand is that when that school bond issue doesn't pass, all that does is just require another election be called, because they're going to have to pass it. So it's kind of a waste of money to have to call another election to pass it. I think a simple majority should rule on that situation.
How do you define a family? And would you support legislation that allows gays and lesbians to marry and to adopt children?
Well, that's a pretty ticklish subject. I guess there's nothing like being put on the hot seat. But
Welcome to Capital Ideas.
right. To define a family, it's hard to say. I mean, obviously the ideal world would be a traditional family of a mother and a father, you know, I guess 2.5 kids. You know, I broke that mold. I have 6 sons, so I didn't follow that rule. But I think that would certainly be the ideal situation. But obviously there are a lot of children that come from single parent homes, and I don't think that we as legislators or anyone should look down their nose and say that those are not families. So I think that while a lot of times people have lofty goals and ideas, sometimes in the real world those lofty goals or ideas just don't stand up. And so I certainly wouldn't criticize anyone. I came from a broken home myself. So you know, I wouldn't want to criticize anyone for the kind of home that they came from, I'm sorry.
Okay, what do you see as the most important topics that the legislature will discuss this year?
Well, as always, education is going to be one of the key issues and one of the major topics. And I think the crime issue and prison overcrowding, and hopefully we're going to get rid of the prison early release law. So I think those are probably going to be 2 of the major issues, probably transportation and infrastructure, you know, highway and bridge building and that sort of thing is also going to be a major topic, but probably not quite as prominent as education and the prison situation.
All right. What area of the public school system do you believe needs the most improvement?
You said of the public school system?
Of the public school system.
Well, I still believe that probably teachers are underpaid, but I think obviously the whole system, you know, could always find a place to spend more money. I think that you know, regardless of whether you're talking about teachers having to furnish school supplies or whether the PTAs and parent-teacher organizations having to supplement school incomes, you know, for supplies and well, I started to say video projectors and things of that nature. That dates me, but nonetheless, whether it be computer supplies, you know, those kinds of things, there are always things that school systems need, and I know a lot of times that the parent-teacher organizations have to have fundraisers and bake sales and carnivals and those kinds of things in order to help supplement the school, their own particular school. So I think there's always areas of need at any level in the public school system.
What committees are you on?
Well, I'm on the Commerce, Industry, and Labor Committee. I'm vice chair of that. Then I'm also on the Insurance Committee, Public Safety Committee, and Mental Health.
What committee do you think is most relevant to teenagers, if any?
Well, that would be hard to say because I guess for teenagers that can get in trouble, well, then maybe the the ones dealing with the prisons and the Department of Corrections might be. But on the other hand, I think teenagers would be affected by most any of them, especially the Rules and Appropriations Committees, because obviously school funding and the highway system and all those things are affected by the Appropriations Committees. But nonetheless, Public Safety Committee would be another one that would affect teenagers a lot because that has to deal with many areas and subjects. Insurance would be another area that would affect them because of dealing with things from car insurance, health insurance, life insurance, and those kinds of areas. And, so I think teenagers probably are affected by most of the committees. They may not realize it, but they probably are.
How long have you been involved in politics, and in what ways?
Well, this is my first public office to seek or hold. So fortunately I was elected on my first attempt. But I have always been active in politics, but just in minor ways or behind the scenes.
What do you think will be the most challenging thing about being a state representative?
Probably figuring out how to spend the money and hopefully put it in the right places.
How did you like going to Central, and what were some of your experiences there?
Well, I enjoyed it. I probably had so many experiences it'd be difficult to pick one out. I guess one of the things that was probably a big thrill or excitement for me was that I was in the first class to go to Central, and by that I mean first class to go there, I guess, as a 7th grader, because at the time, previous to that time, the elementary schools were 1 through 7. There was no kindergarten. And then when I went to Central, I went there as a 7th grade, so I was in the first 7th grade class. My class was the first group to go there and go for 3 years. I had an older sister that went there the same year I did, but she was in the 8th grade, so she only got to stay there 2 years. But that was quite a change for me, because at that time we basically stayed in, I'm talking about in elementary school, we basically stayed in our own classroom all day long and had the same teacher for almost all the subjects. So to get to change classes and have lockers and do all the things that you kids do now, and you don't think anything of it, but that was a first for me. So that was quite a change, and it was kind of a revolutionary thing.
Okay. You mentioned earlier that you had actually pre-filed 2 and possibly 3 bills, and you really only talked about the one that would be a constitutional amendment if it makes it through the legislature. What are the other 2?
Well, one of the other bills would deal with Griffin Memorial Hospital. There's a group of patients that has a need for a building out there, and through city and county and state governments, a proposal has been written up to be able to get money from the federal government through HUD to help pay for that building, but the state has a requirement or a law that prohibits long-term leases or long-term contracts, and the federal government doesn't want to invest millions of dollars into a building or a project that they only have a contract for 1 or 2 years at a time. So I've pre-filed a bill that would enable the state to enter into a long-term contract with the federal government in order to obtain that money, but it would be subject to a review every 10 years. So that's a second bill that I've pre-filed, and then the third bill that I'm currently negotiating with the Department of Public Safety is dealing with the numbers on the driver's license and identification cards. Most people use their Social Security number as their driver's license number, but a few people choose to use some different number with still a 9-digit number. So you have a potential problem. It doesn't happen very often, but it's a big problem for the people that it happens to. When if somebody was to make up a number to use on their driver's license or ID card, and it happened to be your Social Security number, it causes confusion, and especially in the case of credit issues, or sometimes in law enforcement, such as if somebody writes a bad check or something and they're identified by that number, it could create problems with misidentification if that's your Social Security number but someone else has used it simply as their ID number. Currently, the state cannot revoke that license number if there's that conflict, and so the bill that I'm considering, and we're still negotiating on the language to use, but if we get the language worked out to suit me, then I would file a bill that would allow the state to revoke that number in the event of a conflict like that.
Where do these bills come from? I mean, did you come into this with some of these in the back of your head that you wanted to do, or were these brought to you by constituents and you felt that you could do something with it?
Well, in regard to the school bond issue, that's an area that I've kind of always felt like was unfair. Unfortunately, here in Norman, Norman has always passed their school bond issues, and Norman has always been great to support their schools. As you stated earlier, that's not the case in some of the other communities, so that they have had trouble passing their school bond elections. So I've always felt like that was an issue, but it was brought to me by constituents also, and the same is true with these other bills. So I guess I'd have to say that most of the ideas, I think, come from constituents.
Okay. Do they write the bills, or do you write the bills?
No, they basically just come with the idea of what they think is a need or a desire. And fortunately, we as legislators do not have to actually come up with the legal language. The state has a legal staff at the Capitol that researches the issue and actually puts the legal language to it. But the legislator that is going to be the author of the bill still has the authority to make changes if things don't read quite to suit them.
Okay, very good. I want to thank you very much for being with us this morning. I want to thank the two students from Central for giving you some tough ones to get you started. Now you know.
Yeah, they did. Well, that'll make the legislature seem easy. But I've enjoyed it. Appreciate the chance.
Hopefully you'll come back in late April or May once things have kind of settled down and you have some idea of what bills are actually going to be reported out in the final tally, and see what's happened and how you feel about all of that.
All right, great. Well, I've enjoyed it.
Good. Best of luck to you, and we'll be back next week with another Capital Ideas.
Thank you.